Is in the name of Deputy Broughan to the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, the need for capital funding for the dredging of Howth Harbour in early 2016. Deputy, 4 minutes.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach. Well, as you know, of course, Howth is one of Dublin and Ireland's most beloved and visited seaside towns, and one of Ireland's 6 national working fishery harbours. Indeed, it's the premier fishery port on the east coast with a synchro lift and a repair yard. And tourism to the port and peninsula, of course, has increased greatly, with perhaps 2,000 visitors per day and up to 750,000 visitors a year. And it's a very historic port, was recognised as a trading port from the medieval era, and of course it was the port of Dublin in the early 19th century. It's so many great working fishery and marine leisure traditions, and of course it's also famed for the delicious white fish when in quota, and for Dublin Bay prawns caught off this picturesque part of Dublin Bay. It also, of course, has a special amenity area for 2 decades now, and is also part of the new Dublin Bay UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, which I indeed proposed. However, in recent weeks, Cathaoirleach, I've been contacted by members of the Howth Harbour Users and Action Group who are extremely concerned about the build-up of silt in Howth Harbour and the damaging effect this is having on all aspects of this important harbour. The harbour hasn't been dredged for decades, indeed, I think at least from perhaps around 1981-82, and I don't recall a dredging programme in my many years representing the area. The Action Group report this neglect has led to almost 6 feet of silt building up in the harbour and to an operational crisis for all the fishing and leisure craft which use the harbour. In recent questions, Minister Coveney mentioned his Fishery Harbour and Coastal Infrastructure Development Programme 2011-2014, and 4.2 million was invested in maintenance, development, upgrading works at the Howth Fishery Harbour, and 1.79 million was approved for maintaining and developing the harbour centre this year. I understand that the funding this year was allocated to continue work on upgrading the electrical system, provision of a small craft pontoon and traffic management works. Now, this investment, of course, is very welcome, but it's also critical that the harbour should not become unworkable due to the build-up of silt. Howth Harbour Action Group, led by Mr Sean Doran and made up of representatives from the Yacht Club, the boating and sailing clubs, a large trawling company and local businesses, states that the lack of action on dredging is threatening the future of the port, of Howth Port. The build-up of silt is affecting fishing fleets entering the harbour, as they're fearful of being run aground at low tide and have to lie off the port. The group reports that even medium-sized fishing trawlers can't enter the harbour at low tide because the draft is so shallow, and the groundings of vessels are much more commonplace now. The very successful Dublin Bay ferry has also been badly affected, Cathaoirleach, since the build-up of silt makes it impossible nearly to adhere to published timetables. Marine tourism and leisure use of the harbour is also seriously disrupted by the large build-up of silt, and the Action Group say this also compromises the safety of harbour users from the boat and yacht clubs. The Action Group is indeed fearful that a serious accident could result if the port is not dredged as soon as possible. And looking at the department's, Minister Coveney's department's 2016 budget, it certainly seems there is fundable available to take on the dredging programme. As I said, last year for budget 2015, there was the first increase in funding in the marine area since 2009, and there was a fishery harbours development. I think something like 17.8 million was spent on that in total. 14.9 million, in fact, specifically set aside for the 6 fishery centres. I note in reply to a recent parliamentary question to Deputy Coveney last month, he told me that €150,000 for site investigation works to investigate the material to be dredged in any future dredging project had been set aside. So the first thing I'd like the Minister to answer tonight is whether or not that money has actually been spent, whether that study has been carried out, and whether the information gathered will be necessary for a dumping at sea licence, and what time frame could now be available for to proceed if we have the basic report on the investigative works. So it's incomprehensible, of course, Cathaoirleach, that we haven't had a dredging programme for Howth after nearly 40 years, and I know this Minister is not directly responsible, and it's disappointing, of course, Minister Coveney is not here to answer this question himself. In fact, I think when Minister Coveney's father was Minister for the Marine, this problem was raised with us in the mid-90s, and nothing has been done since. Thanks, Cathaoirleach.
Minister.
Good morning, Cathaoirleach, and I want to thank Deputy for raising the issue. The Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine is responsible under statute for the 6 fishery harbour centres located at Howth, Dunmore East, Castletown Bear, Dingle, Russellville and Killybegs. All 6 fishery centres are first and foremost working fishery harbours, which provide essential services and facilities to the fishing industry around the coastline of Ireland. Each fishery harbour centre has unique features which facilitate a broad range of other diverse activities which are important from both an economic and social perspective. The Department is conscious of the need to facilitate and further develop the fishing and non-fishing activities at the harbours. This involves day-to-day operational support by harbour staff and management and development and repair of infrastructure subject to available financial resources. I am happy to advise the House that, notwithstanding the prevailing economic environment in which we operate, in excess of €4.2 million has been invested in maintenance, development and upgrading works at Howth as part of the Department's annual Fishery, Harbour and Coastal Infrastructure Development Programme from 2011 to 2014. For 2015, Minister Coveney approved funding of €1.79 million for the maintenance and development of Howth Fishery Harbour Centre. Major works for 2015 includes the continued upgrading of the electrical system, provision of a small craft pontoon and traffic management works. Siltation in Howth is recognised as an issue and is being kept under review. It has been discussed with various stakeholders. Indeed, officials from the Department attended the Howth Harbour Users Forum on the 29th of January 2015 and used the occasion to have a number of tangential meetings with users where the issue of dredging was discussed. A further meeting with Howth Yacht Club was held on the 17th of July, where again the question of dredging was the main item of discussion. As part of the 2015 Fishery Harbour Centre Development Programme, the Minister sanctioned €150,000 to carry out site investigation works in Howth for the West Pier pontoon and the Middle Pier upgrade. The site investigation contractor commenced work on site in early November and is expected to be substantially complete by the end of the year. It is anticipated that the report on the site investigation will be issued in early 2016. This report will include information on the nature of the material to be dredged and extent of the contamination material within the dredge footprint. This information is required to prepare a dumping at sea licence application, which will be necessary for the commencement of any dredging project in the future. It will also provide the basis for an informed estimate of the cost of dredging the harbour at Howth. As with all other developments in the 6 fishery harbour centres, a dredging project at Howth Fishery Harbour Centre will be considered under future capital programmes on the basis of available exchequer funding and competing priorities. The suite of projects for inclusion in the 2016 programme is being considered, and the Minister will make an announcement on these in due course.
Thank you, Minister, for the response. I think the information is the information that we've had before. The 4.2 million, for example, between 2011 and 2014, as I said, it was welcome, and also 1.7 million, which is supposed to have been spent this year. But I think the additional funding was necessary, critically necessary, since 2011 to prepare and commence this urgently needed programme of dredging. And as I said, you mentioned €150,000 preparatory report will hopefully be ready, in the next month or so. So I certainly welcome that, and I hope that will be, widely published, and that we'll know exactly then what has to be done. And you obviously said in the reply as well, there's no information on costings except that it will be substantial. I think we know it will be significant costing, and again, I'd hope that the Department and the Minister, they would begin immediate work on the costings, on the scoping report, on how the dredging project could be carried out, and on the likely time frame. I mean, the Howth Harbour Action Group accept that planning and licensing process, it does take time, but that could push the dredging project way out to 2017, 2018, 2019, and obviously that's not going to be good for any of the leisure users or any of the working fishery users of the harbour. In the 2016 budget expenditure report, I noticed that the Minister has 200 million, and it would have been handy to have him here, actually, Minister, to talk to him about this. He's 200 million set aside each year for capital projects, 2016, 17 and 18. So obviously a significant portion of that, in the overall global terms, it could be quite small, maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 million, should be set aside, I think, to urgently proceed with this. As I said in the most recent parliamentary question I asked Minister Coveney, he couldn't give me figures on the employment statistics relating to the private and state organisations operating out of the Harbour Centre, and hopefully that kind of information will become available now, along with all aspects of the economy of the centre. I know Mr Doran's enterprise alone supports about 100 jobs. So bottom line is, as you know, Minister, marine safety is the core value for all seafarers and their support workers and people on shore, which both of us now would be. So, and the great inconvenience and risk, danger perhaps to fishing and leisure craft, it has to be ended, and we need to proceed with a dredging programme quick as possible. So hopefully in your pre-budget announcements, yourself or somebody else in the government might be able to include the dredging project for Howth as part of the good news that we're going to hear before the government ends. Thanks, Cathaoirleach.
Okay, our Minister.
Yeah, just to thanks, Deputy, for raising this issue. It is an important issue, and I have to say I agree with many of the points that he has raised. I think perhaps on the publication of the report, as you say, in early next year, that perhaps the local deputies and interested parties would be in a position to meet with the Minister. And I think I'll do my best to facilitate that, because I think that would be the best way that we can proceed, and then to ask about the capital allocation and see if we can move the issue forward. But it is a wonderful amenity, Deputy, and I think the issues that you raised are extremely important, and we need to be in a position to act on them and to proceed in an appropriate manner once that report is available to us. But as you say, it should be published, it should be available, it should be transparent, and we should be able to act on it as soon as it is published. And what we can do, myself and yourself, can facilitate a meeting with the Minister to ensure we can act on it.
Next item is in the name of Deputy Joan